Right, thank you very much for joining this session. This is all about AI agents. I've got two great panelists here to have a conversation, but obviously that conversation can extend to all of you. So we've got a mic where we can run it around if other people want to ask questions. But before we get started, let's just, so we understand where we've all got to, who here has actually built an agent? Okay, a few of you. All right, great. So a few people have got some experience, but a lot of people are here clearly to learn what works, what doesn't work, in what is very clearly an emerging marketplace. No one has all the right answers. There's no such thing as best practice. There's only where we've got to at the moment, and we're still evolving that. So we're all here to learn collectively about what we can do better to make agents work. So first of all, let's meet the panel. So Heather, can you just explain just a minute or so about your background?
Absolutely. Can you guys hear me? It's working on. All right. My name is Heather Maples. I'm with Dollar Bank. My background is a little bit interesting. So I didn't start out in technology. I was actually a sales manager about 13, 14 years ago, running a fintech company, and learned Salesforce there. I became that accidental admin. So with that, I really decided to take my career and change from sales management into the Salesforce ecosystem, and started working at Summa Technologies. So friends with the Hike 2 team here pretty closely. And just found a passion for the platform and did all of the trailheads, taught myself how to code, do all the amazing things that Salesforce offers, and then went to go work for PNC Bank. Did a greenfield implementation there and found an analytics gap and introduced CRMA to the bank. When I left there, we were across the entire nation in every branch, leveraging analytics to be able to help our bankers do their jobs more efficiently. Recently joined Dollar Bank as a Salesforce platform owner. Another greenfield implementation that I'm really excited to bring all the knowledge forward. It's a pretty cool journey. One I never thought 12 years ago, if you asked me where I would be, owning a Salesforce platform for a bank is not the answer I thought I would give. But really excited to be here. Thanks, Ian.
So Andy, just a summary about a little bit of your background just to set the context.
So Andy Stahl, I'm with Databricks. I've been in analytics more years than I care to think about. If you're a Pittsburgher, you probably will appreciate this. My favorite dinosaur is Dippy. Okay. Been building and deploying analytics for a long time. Was part of a 23-person machine learning startup that was acquired by Salesforce. Mr. Colson there knows, and I've been part of that. And that was the very first Einstein offering back in 2016. And John and I and some others helped scale that business to an $800 million business within Salesforce. Now my job is a combination of public speaking and teaching within Databricks, customers as well as partners, as well as internal. And I actually do have some client-facing responsibilities, and I implement agents. I implement AI, data intelligence. So hands-on, doing work. My coding sucks, but thank God we have agents that could do that for me.
Excellent, thank you. I guess 2 seconds on me, 3 numbers, 10, 20, 30. 10 years as an Accenture consultant, I've written 10 books on business change and compliance. 20 years as an Accenture, so 20 years as a Salesforce customer, so I'm allowed to drink now. And 30 years on my soapbox saying why business analysis is important. And interestingly enough, business analysis suddenly is becoming even more important when we're building agents. So internally, we've built eight agents. They're all live. Got another 8 in production. So we've been on this journey for a short while, and we've got some experience about what works and what doesn't work. But before we launch into some of the things about what does and doesn't work, Heather, just tell me where you are on your journey from no idea what to do, thinking about it, building and deploying. Where are you on that journey?
So we are greenfield implementation right now. So I'm in the don't know what to do, moving into the thinking about it range. And when we start to think about how we would leverage it, I'm finding those use cases internally that will help us do better internally. Obviously, as a highly regulated industry, there's some extra things that we need to look at and think about. But yeah, we are in that ideation, like thinking about ideation phase. I have my eyes definitely on it.
So someone might go, well, that's great, but why on earth are you on the panel if you've never had done it with agents? Which I think, you might, that's a question for the audience, but I think you're at the really important part where many people are, which is going, okay, we can't just throw these things into the business. We've got to think about it from a compliance perspective. So I think your insights into what it takes to actually get the buy-in from senior management, I think will be really important.
I think it's that, as well as being that greenfield implementation. We're working on a data migration strategy right now to ensure that our data is clean and ready. So when we do bring the agents in, we are hitting it head on versus having to do a bunch of cleanup and data cleansing prior to it. We're going to be able to just jump straight in.
Okay, so getting some of the foundations in place.
Correct.
And we'll pick that up a little bit later. Andy, I mean, you've been talking about agents and AI for a number of years, but where are you in terms of Databricks internally, but then think about some of the clients you're talking about. Where do you think they are in terms of that journey?
Most of the clients are relatively early. And here's the problem. If you look at maturity curve, and I've started talking to them about maturity assessments, they're still, half of them are still out of the gate. They haven't done anything. They'll bring in a Chat GPT or a Microsoft Copilot or something, and 3 people play with it. That's great, but that's not how agents or how the technology is going to transform. And specifically, we use the word transform. You think about, I tend to think in terms of the agent, or you use the term AI as your new UI. So I think in terms of, particularly, I'm old, I'm cranky, I have a dinosaur, but how do I get me to use it? Okay, I can get my 27-year-old to use it, right? But getting me to use it, and if you look at the bell curve of employees, by the way, the older the employee is, the more tenure, the less successful AI is with them. By the way, statistical studies have shown. So how do you get it to have value for me? How do you have it value across the organization? So I think in terms of that, and I start for that as the result, because I can build anything. Building it is not hard. Building an agent, a day. Deploying it, getting it used, really hard. So if I intend to be successful, I go from the other side. How do I get people to use and consume? And that's much more understanding the psychology of that. And then from there, work backwards of what it needs to be and incorporating it into a way that it's part of their job. The model I use in thinking about things is Amazon's recommendation engine, which is others like you. Widely used. If I tell my wife that's a recommendation engine, it's going to give her a guided insight on what to buy, she tells me to go F off, go back to my reading. But millions of people use that every day, and they don't think in terms of that. It's something that's useful and valuable. So you have to think in terms of putting it in, like Amazon has in their page, as part of the UI to make that happen and consumable. That will change how you think of applications.
So let's pick up, there are a number of points, let's pick up some of the points there. I think Amazon, and you kind of understand what the recommendation engine is doing, but I think with agents, there's a level of confidence that we're not getting there, which I think senior executives are going, okay, I'm not confident that this is going to come up with the same answers consistently. So I think we've got a slightly different challenge there as well, which we need to get over.
That's an engineering problem.
Why is it? Okay.
Okay. So if you think about what you said, consistency of response, okay? There's a couple of things associated with that. You're never going to get 100%. Let's be real, okay? And remember, it is prediction, okay? So if you think about what we're doing, part of the thing I would challenge is I would not look at the mass market LLMs. Who cares if I'm building an app in my internal to my company? If I'm not into baseball, who cares who won the 1974 World Series? ChatGPT can give me that. Who needs that? So I'm going to construct my agent. And by the way, it's not one agent. It's a series, it's compound. It's multiple agents doing very specific things, tool and tasking, purposely built. Personally, I'm a fan of small language models that are much smaller.
I'm not sure it's the large language models we should be concerned about. Surely it's actually how we're instructing them.
Correct, and
And
that's
that's
my
about
point.
scope.
And it's the training data you put into there. Then what you have to do, depending on that data, depending on the complexity, and remember, when you think of data, I'm as guilty as this as everybody. We all think in terms of the classic Salesforce, ERP, Workday, SAP, tabular data, or what I call tabular. Rows, columns, goes into a spreadsheet, into a data warehouse. That's a tiny part of the data associated with it. So you have to think in terms of PDFs, JSON, audio, call logs, all this stuff. That requires a different thought in how you provide data hygiene, particularly if you're looking like contracts. Contracts, big issue. If I'm going to do a contract recall, I have to have the exact contract, right? Contract's not always one document, it's multiple documents. So you got to start thinking in terms of an ontology that links all the documents together so you can pull them back and have a summary of everything in that contract. Otherwise, your legal people are going to have to go back and do it manually, and then why bother? So if you do all of that, then on top of that, you need to have the ability to trace and have an audit trail. Because every time I get a bad answer, think of it in terms of reinforcement learning. It's a bad answer. Somebody tells me it's a bad answer. How do I fix it? If I don't know what document it went to, I don't know where it is, I can't do that. So if I engineer that reinforcement learning and I have the ability to trace, I can track the document. So what you're really getting into is governance. Governance not just on the tabular data, but across all your data. So it requires a much more engineering, software focus to be able to do that. You can substantially reduce your risk of hallucinations to be able to do that, but it requires planning and understanding. If you don't, you'll spend a lot of money and you'll get nothing.
Okay, well, I agree with that. I wasn't agreeing with you at the beginning, but you've argued me around to actually, yeah, it is an engineering problem.
Yeah.
So Heather, I guess with that as a backdrop, one of the things we talked about was improving data, but what are the use cases that you're currently thinking about? Let's see where you're starting.
So everything that he just said is why we are taking it slow, and I didn't understand half of it. But this is why we hire the people that do. So my initial use cases are very basic, training. And this is something I think that we could really bring on when we implement Salesforce, is to have those agents available to help our training go faster. We just heard from Shannon. I caught the end of her session, and it was awesome to hear about adults and learning and how we are going to need that top-down buy-in by applying the agent into our training modules and giving them access to this so they can train as they're going, and it helps them do those repetitive things. I think it's a great starting point to introduce it, to start to teach the model, and then to get that adoption and that buy-in internally. And then second to that, as one that's high on my list, is from a service perspective. Internally, instead of using knowledge articles, using those agents to create the case and then bring forward the information and help our service teams solve cases faster and hopefully bring down the transfer of calls and make it that first call resolution.
So it's interesting, a couple of those, or both those use cases are both internally focused.
Yes.
And I think we're seeing a lot of people looking at agents and going, well, we can put them on our externally facing website and they can answer everything. That's got to be the highest risk area in terms of both liability, in terms of hallucination, and also you're not going to get feedback from customers, they're just not going to talk to you. But if you're going to employees, yeah, lower risk, smaller subset, you can build tighter agents. And I think that's the mistake we're seeing a lot, which is people hitting for taking your baseball, hitting for I don't know what the term is now, hitting for the home run rather than actually going, no, I'll just take a bunt here, we'll just get to the next, we'll just get to the first base. And I think there's quite a lot of people not thinking about the strategy correctly. I think your approach is absolutely right. Let's think about employees, let's think about where we can actually help and engage them and take some baby steps. So is that what you're seeing with the customers you're talking to?
Partially. So customers that I've seen are trying everything. It's no differently than the machine learning craze of 2015, 2016. People trying to do different things. So they fail. It's watching your children grow, step, stumble, fail. You try not to hold them up, you let them fall, and then they learn to get up on their own.
Okay, can I start from it? What do you mean by fail?
They try a project like chatbot, okay? We're gonna throw a customer service chatbot out there, okay? I've not met a chatbot yet that I like, okay? You know, I got American Airlines, do you wanna rebook through the chatbot? Yeah, I'm gonna risk my flight on a chatbot, okay? It may make them happy, it may work, but it's stupid. So it's understanding that human condition to be able to do that. So they'll try something because it's neat, innovative, and somebody has an objective to do it. But it comes back then, what happens is corporate risk gets involved. Like, what does that mean to our customer experience? okay? Am I going to drive you away to go to United? Not they're any better, by the way. And so you got to start thinking in terms of bringing it back. So internally, we decided we're going to build an agent for sales, okay? We looked at Agentforce, we looked at a variety of technologies, and we're geeks, so we decided to build our own, okay? It took 3 times as long to build it, okay? And the biggest problem was what's really important. And what we found was the vast majority of data that we needed for the chatbot didn't live in Salesforce. It's supplementing what a salesperson needs. So for instance, compensation data. None of that lives in Salesforce. In our case, it lives in Exactly. All data about customers and consumption and utilization, that lives in a Databricks instance. So, but we wanted to put it, how would you use and consume it? So thinking through that UI, to put it there. So we spent a significant amount of time understanding and using it. And then when we rolled it out to the pilot group, we tracked feedback, okay? And every time somebody clicked the down arrow, you got a Slack within a minute of somebody, a human, okay, saying, what the hell? Why is this wrong? What's your concern about that? And we addressed every single one of those to understand and to define. And is it a data quality issue? And by the way, the bulk of it was data quality. And so to give an example, I was looking at telco customers, and I wanted to understand how other telco companies are using product versus ours, the one I was looking at. And every answer came back was AT&T. Now, AT&T is a massive customer. Let's not hide that. But after the first 15 answers were AT&T, it's worthless to me. I need to know what maybe Rogers in Canada or NTT in Japan or whoever, right? Telefonica. And so we realized that if we, because it was overly weighted based on the volume and such, we had to train the bot to be specific about, more detailed on that, to provide a quality answer back. And it just took time.
Okay, so I think this is getting us nicely into what we think the foundations are for trying to build these agents. So you clearly talked about data quality. What are the other things, Heather, what are the other things that you're considering as you're leaning into agents?
One of the big ones is the security around it and ensuring that it's going to send us back those appropriate responses. The last thing you want to do is call your bank. It's your bank, right? It's your money. And you're going to say something and they're going to be like, oh, let me just look that up on my little chatbot thing. And it sends back some whack answer. And now you're giving the client terrible information. So ensuring that we're teaching it the right things so that we can have those educated conversations and we're locking that security down so it's not leaking.
Okay, so there were 2 things there. One, I think, is reliability and confidence.
Correct.
Which I think Andy talked about earlier in terms of getting that feedback. And I think that's really important, Andy, the idea of if the results aren't good, let's very quickly understand they're not good so we can fix them rather than the person just stops using it and you don't realize. Okay, so that's the first thing. Security was the other issue, which was about making sure that customer data doesn't leak.
Correct. That's number 1. Obviously,
Yep.
Making sure that PII is locked down like the Vatican. We don't want anybody being able to see that stuff. I always go back to data. Like data. It has to be good and it has to be clean and it has to be accurate before any of this is going.
I'd add one thing. It has to be governed.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay, so if you think about it, it's a combination of hygiene, management, and governance that will ensure you the highest success in doing it. And from there, it's just operationalizing it, which is, don't get me wrong, operationalizing it at scale can be challenging, but there's tooling and things that allow you to do that. The key is if you don't get your data right, the foundational pieces, and you got to remember, data is not generally on one specific platform. I might have it across other places, so the governance becomes an issue. So then you have to think about, do I centralize my governance in my data in a specific area? And again, the skills for hygiene, what I do on my tabular is very different than I do. Good example, I was talking to a client about the contract use case. They wanted to do summarization. He has 40,000 legal documents, right? And he says to me, what did you think about the use case? I said, great use case, won't work. And he looks at me and says, why? By the way, I found out afterwards they spent 8 months with a partner trying to get it to work. And he says to me, why? I said, well, you have contracts. First contracts date from the 80s, last contract dates from last week. Some are DocuSign, most are PDFs that are scanned, okay? That somebody typed on, and then somebody addended, put a handwritten note on it, and everything else. And now you're asking an AI to read somebody's handwriting. And oh, by the way, that contract has 14 different addendums from different years, so it goes to the ontology problem. Said, what you need to do is you need to spend time on your OCR, and then you need to build the ontology, and then I can get it to work.
But so the point there is data's not just data sitting in a database somewhere. It could be voice.
Absolutely.
Could be text. It could be unstructured PDFs. Then the other thing which we probably haven't picked up on is those documents are probably not written with an AI in mind.
Absolutely not.
They're written for a human.
Yeah. By the way, the other part that he wanted to do is he wanted to take what was in the contract and compare that to a video picture of a device taken by a drone. So if you think about what he's really talking about in this scenario is a bill of materials as designed, as built, as maintained, comparing to the contract, because that leads to revenue leakage. If the contract says this and you have different things on the device, he can go back and charge revenue for. So it's a hugely important use case for him. But it's bound, the issue for him resolving it is a combination of data quality, both on the pictures, because you got to be able to be accurate in discerning what that device is, and then comparing it to the contract document and being accurate what's in the contract.
That sounds like a great use case. I don't think it's use case number one, though.
It was. It still is.
Okay, all right. That's one of those, well, you just back away gently. Go, that's fine, that's not...
Oh, well, I'll build it for him.
Makes me go ahead thinking.
Okay, but let's pick in some of the points out of that. One is data quality is not just... There are different forms of data that we need to worry about. The second is we need to make sure if it's procedural or it's PDFs, it has to be written with an AI in mind, which is like a 14-year-old who just reads everything literally. When I was saying to my son Max, I said, well, why are you eating chocolate? He said, it's a Wednesday. I went, well, what's that got to do? He said, well, you said on Tuesday not eat chocolate. No, that's not what I meant. I meant on Tuesday, comma, don't eat chocolate, not on Tuesday, don't eat chocolate. But that one
Semantics.
comma makes a difference. So we need to think about some of that documentation, and then, as you said, put a change cycle around. If we are going to improve it, how are we going to go and improve it? Mm-hmm. Again, probably a huge issue at a bank where you think how much documentation's out there.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. As soon as he was talking about contracts, I was like, no, we're not touching that one yet.
Not yet, but you will get to it.
Key word.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
So when I start to think about implementing these agents, it's this stuff. Like, okay, I could do it for next best product. I could say who has what product and where do they fall and we should pitch to them next. But the contract thing, and when you start talking about the really sticky stuff, that's where I would love to talk to other banks and see how they're implementing it, because we would be like, nope, the Homer Simpson thing where he backs into the bushes slowly. That would be our approach on that one.
But it's a risk decision.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not very risk averse.
But you're risk averse because you're a bank.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that there aren't good internal use cases that you could use them for. So I think
so many.
saying risk shouldn't be a reason for saying no. It should be a reason for saying not yet, or what are the early steps, because you have to get started.
Absolutely. I mean, the agents are future. It's going to happen. They're sticking around. They're not going anywhere. So it's absolutely starting at zero and just easing our way into it, teaching it from the inside. It'd be amazing for us to have a bot that's externally facing so that our clients could do more self-serve, but
Not yet.
I think we got a question.
Sorry, yeah. Could you run a mic? Thank you.
Here.
Just so we make sure we have it on the recording.
Thank you. Andy had started kind of talking about this with like setting realistic expectations, right? This number one use case is, I want to compare these different types of data, and also, all the data is in different formats, and also the data quality is pretty bad, right? But that's the number one use case. So I guess one of the questions I have is like, from an internal perspective, from a consultant perspective, whatever perspective, how do you set appropriate expectations with what it actually might look like to try to start the process of implementing AI? Because realistically, you want to start small and work your way up, but that's not really what clients want more often than not.
Well, it depends, okay? if you're thinking in terms of that, that's not a practitioner discussion. That's an executive discussion and really tied to strategy, okay? So the discussion I had on the contracts, the person I had the discussion with were two people, the CFO and the CIO, okay? Not a practitioner or anybody else. And the reason that was their number one use case is that can contribute significant amount of revenue to their bottom line. So they're looking at it from a value impact realization. That's a big one, much more so than virtually. They'll play with co-pilots and kick the tires and have people write some letters, but that's meaningless on a value realization perspective. Not unimportant because you're trying to build muscle memory, you're trying to build some skills. But if you're looking at being transformative, right? And in their case, they're thinking very transformative. How is this going to change my business, right? And it took a while to wheedle that out of them because it's not words that natural to them, okay? So think in terms, if I'm having a candid conversation with a business leader, a C-level executive, whatever, what are you trying to do with the business? What's important? And what is your threshold for risk? Back to that point. This company, I mean, you say contracts, it's risky. Absolutely. If you're thinking in terms of a bank, and I'm a dollar bank customer, okay, you think in terms of customer experience. The last thing I want is somebody telling me that my money's missing. It may be there because it's the wrong result. I'm probably, I've been a dollar bank customer for over 30 years. They don't want me to pull my money out, okay? So that's a risk that you have to say from a customer experience perspective. So think in terms, generally, if you look on risk, there's only 3 reasons to do agents. Let's cut to the chase. Reason number 1, does it make me money? My use case on contracts, it makes money for them, okay? They think. Reason number 2, does it save me money? And usually save me money is getting rid of people. Let's not sugarcoat that. And reason number 3, does it reduce my risk? Rarely do agents reduce risk. Let's call that one out. But you have to look at that value of the first 2 versus the cost of risk. If you have that conversation with a business leader, right, you'll be able to determine what their threshold is and where they're willing to invest in that from a consulting perspective. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of good conversations and lunch and nothing's ever going to get done. Okay?
But also that it's also painting where you could get to from a vision perspective and then what the steps are that you need to get there. And I think one of the phrases you used earlier was build that muscle memory.
Yeah.
So let's not try and build the most complex one until we've really understood how to build agents.
But what's the end? Think of the end goal in sight and work backwards.
Correct.
Yeah.
And take some baby steps there.
Yeah.
And some of that may be, so as Heather, you were saying, is actually getting some of your senior management on board in terms of what are the things, what's the work you have to do before you even get started. So we talked about it, about data quality, and clearly a big issue. I would also say understanding business process, because an agent has to go and follow a business process, ideally. And therefore, if they are not well understood...
I'll challenge you on that.
I'm happy to have that challenge, yes.
Okay. I'd argue understanding the business process, yes. I may change the business process specifically because if agents are re-engineering. That's transformative, and that's much more...
No, I get that, but,
okay.
But you've got to change it from to something... So the definition of... But we need to, even if it's transformed, we still need to get to a point where we know what that agent is expected to do. Yep. There's quite a lot of agents know your business, they can just work it out. Bullshit. I'm sorry, that doesn't count. That isn't true. If you think of an agent as digital labor, you wouldn't get an intern into your business and go, fantastic, there's the phone, you know what our clients are like, knock yourselves out. You'd actually say, okay, these are the things I'd like you to go and do. You'd actually give them some instructions. In the 1990s, for some of those who were around at that time, there were loads and loads of procedural documents. There were no process diagrams, there were no computers. I remember my first job was inserting new pages into procedural documents for ISO 9000, okay? Eventually we went, those big procedure documents, no one reads. We ought to have process diagrams so people could understand things. It feels like we're falling into the same trap all over again by going, the way to build an agent is you just write loads of instructions rather than going, there we go. So let's think about what the agent's meant to be doing. Now, for a bank, I'm hoping you've got lots of your processes well documented, you're regulated. But for many organizations, they haven't. And therefore, that's another of those foundational activities you can do even before you start going with agents. Mm-hmm. So we agreed?
I'll agree on that.
Good, okay. So, and then the last thing I think is if you're expecting agents to reuse some of parts of your application, they need to be well documented. And often we're not seeing that. So again, if you're expecting to reuse workflows or reuse different data structures, if you haven't got that well documented, that's going to be another blocker. So where are you on that journey in terms of, you talked about data, but Heather, where are you on that journey around process and systems?
We're in a unique spot now that we're redefining process because we're implementing Salesforce. So with that, we're gonna be able to naturally design the new processes, document those well. I really think we're at a pretty cool advantage, like completely greenfield. We get, like the world is our oyster and how we wanna design the entire platform and that customer experience, and leveraging tools like the agents to enhance it.
So are you looking at redesigning the business with agents in mind?
It is me, yes. I can't speak for the bank. So, because it's greenfield, and Dollar's been around for 170 years, 75 years, they're stuck in their ways, like most financial institutions. So it is a part of the process and the learning process of them adopting change. And so these new processes that we're implementing with Salesforce, in the back of my mind, I am keeping in mind that we will be implementing the agents in the future. So I'm preparing it now. So should and or when we go down that road, we're prepared.
Yeah. Okay. So there's not just it's not just technology. It's about engaging some of the senior management and getting some education there.
Correct.
Okay.
So I'm going to toss a statement out. The cost of inference, the cost of doing this, building the intelligent answer, is going to zero. Open source is going to crush the models and drive the cost of being able to do decisioning to zero. The cost in doing this is not going to be anywhere close to that. The cost is in your data quality, okay? It's in your processes. It's in your governance. It requires discipline. It will work better in regulated industries because they have to have you do that. What I have found, a couple of rules, that when I work with data, when I work with HR data, using Workday as a proxy, it works better because generally the data coming out of there isn't bad. My policies and procedures are defined. I have things that can work really well. So to build internal chatbot around HR and policies, doable. It's a great way to learn muscle memory. Moderate value, particularly if you're thinking of employee experience, right? But it can work and it's relatively low risk. Financials. My SAP data, my CFO signs a statement every month, every quarter, and if it's wrong, he goes to jail. That data quality is moderately good. My financial processes generally are pretty good. I have documentation. I have auditors that track all that. Again, another area. CRM, welcome to the Wild West, okay? And the further you go from having clearly defined, documented processes with quality data, that's when you would think contracts is good quality data. They are, if the data quality, if the document is good, okay? So having that is really interesting, and if you're thoughtful, it can really be very impactful and efficient. If not, I probably shouldn't say this, consultants will make a lot of money by doing it because they'll clean up your data for you and they'll document your processes for you. And remember, it's not the traditional tabular data warehouse stuff. It's that PDFs and JSON and all that other stuff. And that's where people don't have necessarily the skills internally in many cases to do that because they threw it up on SharePoint for the last 30 years.
So, but I also think that the speed that things are changing is actually also driving a different dynamic as well. Because you listed off some things, which is, I know, PDFs and data, but I'm going to add video into that and audio into that relatively quickly. So a question at the back there.
Yeah, Andy, you talked about this before. Let's take the example of contracts. So most modern organizations use contract management systems. Have you seen people actually getting really good at the ontological work of connecting what is in a contract system to the unstructured data in a way that actually makes that useful?
I'm going to give a vendor shout out, and it's not us, by the way. Okay, it's not Databricks. So I have thought about working with Neo4j. It's a graph database. So I think you're going to have to look at your tooling to do that. I'm not really deep conversant in like an iCertis or some of the contract management systems, but I think you're going to have to, if you're going to get into that and you're going to look at it, you're going to have to go to something like a graph rag type of approach. And there's a variety of different toolings out there. I happen to know some folks at Neo4j that I've talked to, like, hey, we haven't talked in 2 years or 3 years. Tell me what you're doing and explain to me why this is interesting, because I could potentially see value in it. So I'm sorry I can't be more helpful than that, but I think you're going to have to bring in that level of expertise specifically on that to drive that.
So I want to change track and thinking about careers in the future, but any other questions from the floor before we launch into sort of a different direction?
Yes, so I was thinking, we're talking a lot about some of the things that we need to do to build these agents from the ground up. I'm kind of coming into AI at a base level. Are some of the out-of-the-box agents that might be sold to my company, do they come with some of those challenges already sorted out?
No.
Or is it from the ground up, no matter what agent you buy?
I'll answer that. So if you think about agents, there's really 3 approaches to agents today. There's OTS, off the shelf. There are technology vendors, some big platforms, some others, that are building agents. They have relatively different, and every one of them has a different set of limitations. Some of them follow, what I call the Palantir model. Palantir has really great technology, and they'll deploy a bunch of engineers to build it for you. Okay? So be careful when you say it's off the shelf, because a lot of it's some of that. Then you're starting to see the growth of what I call marketplaces. So think of it as like the Salesforce App Exchange, where you can download. There's a bunch of stuff out there on that. And then there's the other side, and I like to build. So remember my bias. I think particularly you're going to find, if you're going to be particularly at scale, you're going to have to build. And again, I believe in what I call a compound approach. So if you think of building an application, there's tools, there's personalities, there's all sorts of things. And I will use very different specific models to engineer. So I'll give an example. We have a bot internally that it's a product that we built for customers. It's called Genie. It's a horrible name. I don't know if we copied the name from Salesforce, but we have Genie. Okay? Genie is, at its heart and soul, text to SQL. Now we're adding some deep logic, deep reasoning and things in there. So you say, it's one bot that does text to SQL. No, it's not. It's 8 different LLM models as a function of that, engineered. So, you look at it, you see a user interface, it's one. But it's very specific to that. And what we have found that when you do that from an approach perspective, though the engineering effort is more significant, one, it runs more efficiently than a single. So if I compare that to ChatGPT or something, it runs faster. It costs less, okay? And it's higher accuracy. So the building of the multiple, use the term compound, putting it together, will get you there. But again, it goes to my point of being thoughtful, because you're now constructing and you're doing that. It also reduces your risk, if particularly on an internal application, because you can tune it. And as you develop, using my term muscle memory, it allows you to start thinking of how I'm going to transition that to my others like you bought this product approach for Amazon.
So let me take this from adding on that, but taking from a different perspective, which is, yeah, there are certainly AI, small limited AI solutions, and if it's in the productivity area, which might be emails and so on, but if you're thinking about the core line of business type agents, it's unlikely that you're going to find all the ones that you need that support your particular industry or the particular issues. So eventually you're going to run out of those and go, well, actually, maybe we need to go and build them. So let's start building them and understanding them, how they work in the first place. So therefore, not building from the ground up in terms of choosing a large language model, but maybe starting at the agent framework level where you can start to build agents relatively easily. And again, not a pitch for Salesforce, but that's Salesforce and Microsoft Copilot, their approach of here's a platform, and therefore you can actually, you've got the components to go and build an agent, is a good way of getting started and start to take some simple line of business type agents, and then you can grow those. So I think longer term we're going to see that there will be agents that we're building. And if you think about the evolution of, say, SAP or Salesforce, it went from we all used to build all the applications, then there were large applications available. I'm thinking in the future we'll end up with all of our core applications have got most of the agents we need embedded, but we are multiple years away from that. So I think at the moment we're at the stage of look at a platform, don't try and build it from the ground up, but look at a platform that enables you to construct the agents that you want.
I'll add one thing. I spend very little time in Pittsburgh, though I live here. I spend a lot more time talking to my friends out on the West Coast. From talking to my buddies at Google and talking to my buddies at Snowflake, who, by the way, are my direct competitors, okay? I can share with you, we're all thinking that this stuff is way too hard, okay? Let's be very clear. So what you're going to see is a collapsing of the culture around agents to build directly. So I'll use the term AI database. So if you think in terms of the data structures, because that's where the data is going to be held. And remember, that doesn't mean it's all tabular. It's more of a lakehouse environment where you're putting everything in. It makes it much easier to govern. And you're going to build the agent functionality there. You'll have all the ML ops to be able to support and scale that built into that structure. And then what you'll be able to do is think in terms of a no-code, low-code kind of environment. So you'll be able to say, I want this and I want that, and be able to do that. And that will probably get you to 80 to 90% of what will be done as long as that data is near that platform or able to federate to that platform and be governed by that platform.
So for Heather, that means, I guess, Agentforce is you're on the core Salesforce platform. So it may be not the only answer, but to start with, the easy steps is Agentforce.
Yeah, definitely. That's the one I would.
That's where you're going to start. That's where you're going to start.
But remember, data has gravity. And again, I think Agentforce is great for a limited range of applications.
But that's what we said. It's about where you get started.
Absolutely.
Where we end up, we could be somewhere else. So just thinking about just future-proofing your career. So, like Heather, you've had an interesting career trajectory, which started as you said, accidental admin, which all the way through now to platform owner. What are the sorts of skills that you think you need to have in place as we move into this new world?
Wow. I don't think I can keep up with all the different skills that are going to be needed. I need to learn more about what Andy's saying and understand.
I'm not sure you necessarily do, but we'll have another conversation about that.
You'll have a different opinion when you hear from me on that.
Go on.
Okay.
I feel like I'm in a tennis.
So when I advise kids in college,
Andy, just let Heather finish for a moment.
Oh, sorry. So, I forgot where I was going with it.
You were saying about the sorts of skills that you think you'll need to.
So memory should be one. So from a developer standpoint, I think that people are already using agents to help define code. I think we're always going to have that human element inside of it, but I think it's going to help us execute faster. But again, teaching it and ensuring that it's building a flow the correct way, so we're not implementing something really wonky and it's going to do something. I think it's just defining our skills and learning how to teach the models. So versus me learning exactly how to code a flow, it's teaching myself, okay, how do I need to work with AI to be able to create that flow?
So using AI as a tool.
Using it as a tool for sure, but I think that human element combined with the technology.
Okay, but also let's think about some of the other things you're doing. You're having to educate senior management. You're having to do a lot more business analysis and data analysis. So some of those higher level skills rather than developer skills as well.
For sure, yeah. It's constantly changing. I don't know about you guys. It's really hard to keep up with. Okay, now I need to go down this path and I need to learn this, or I need to go down this path and learn this. But it's definitely constantly educating yourself. Where the industry is heading, the specific industry you're in, I look at other highly regulated industries to see how they're managing it. And so it's just a combination of just keep running.
Just keep running.
Keep running.
There you go.
I'll give you two that are not natural to most people. Tech skills, programming, etc., table stakes. The two I advise kids, particularly in college today, first one, financial accounting. World runs off of accountants, I'm sorry. And the key, it's not just understanding the accounting, it's understanding of risk. Because if I'm going to be developing and deploying systems, I got to understand what the concept of risk is and how to manage that. particularly if I'm going to be in an executive level, I'm more managing risk than anything else. Second thing, cognitive psychology. Because it's the concept of getting people to use and consume and work as part of the process. I can build anything. Tech skills, I can sit down with a bunch of folks, we can engineer it, right? And if no one uses it, what is the value of it other than I may have gotten paid? Okay? I don't get my second contract. I don't drive my business value. It's the consumption side. So remember I started my conversation, I said my favorite dinosaur is Dippy? The reason for that is this. As an 18-year-old, I was in school. I was in cognitive psychology. They made me go down to the Carnegie Institute to look at the dinosaurs as part of a cognitive psychology class. And they learned the history of Dippy and Andrew Carnegie and all that happy stuff. And they came back and said to me, I was curious. I'm like, why would you make me do that? I'm 18 years old. I don't give a shit about dinosaurs. And what they said to me is, human creativity peaks at around age 5. Age 4, you'll love dinosaurs. Age 5, you get to kindergarten and they tell you cars can't drive underwater and rockets don't go through land. Why? Because physics, because of gravity and all this other stuff, right? So if I want to be creative and understanding and want to be able to be impactful, I want to think like an 5-year-old. I want to have a favorite dinosaur and I'm going to act like that. And it allows me to re-envision the business process, and that's cognitive psychology.
So that feels like a perfect place to finish, which is it's actually about business skills and people skills rather than technical skills. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for this session.